Quick, give me a one-sentence summary of the show Friends. Hold on to your answer. We will come back to it later. There are many factors to good character writing, but possibly the most important is making your characters likable. An audience is more likely to watch a project, no matter how bad or good the story is, if they like the characters in it. The opposite is also true. Watching unenjoyable characters is the quickest way to ruin an otherwise engaging story. I am your host, Jacob. Join us as we look at the importance of writing likable characters and what that actually means. Having strong, well-written characters is probably the most important thing there is to the success of a project. We can have absolutely crap stories, but we will watch them for hours if the characters in them connect to us in some way. That is basically the draw of every sitcom ever produced. Going back to our question from earlier, what did you say the story of Friends is about? I said it is about 6 people living in New York going about their daily lives. The problem is, that isn't a story, at least not in the traditional sense. Sure, the individual characters have story arcs that allow them to develop, but at the end of the day, it is just a bunch of random adventures that have no point to them. There is no overarching narrative to connect between episodes. There is no moral that teaches us a life value. Yet it has been one of the most watched and rewatched shows of the last 30 years. Fans of the show haven't watched reruns for decades because they love the story. They watch it because they love the characters. They care about them. They want to see them succeed at life. When the characters are low, so is the audience. And when the characters overcome their struggles, the audience is right there with them. If a project does have a good story in the traditional sense, and it is filled with characters that an audience enjoys watching, then the audience will be even more heavily invested in the plot through the eyes of their favorite characters. Reveal some gut-wrenching information to Batman? Let your audience sink as their favorite character rushes off in a panic to stop his once ally from undoing his life's work. Give Natasha Romanoff a heroic ending? Let your audience mourn with the rest of the Avengers. Escape Shawshank? Let your audience bask in the feelings of freedom and redemption. Be warned though, because an awful character can just as easily destroy a good story as a good character can save a bad one. What is it that makes a character likable? In our mind, there are 3 aspects of likability. Those aspects are affection, relatability, and entertainment. Each of these aspects is subjective and can be further broken down into subcategories. For example, if you think about characters that you feel some affection for, and then ask yourself why you feel that way, you will likely come up with one of 2 answers. You find their character enjoyable, or you admire them. Finding a character enjoyable is just the same thing as saying that you find them pleasant for some reason. There is something about their personality or design that makes you want to cheer them on. Admiring a character is a little deeper, but just as simple. If you admire a character, it is probably because they exemplify an attitude or virtue that you respect. Captain America is an excellent leader. Wonder Woman never gives up, and Superman is a beacon of hope in every situation. Unless Zack Snyder is directing him, in which case all bets are off. If you can find a quality in another character that you respect, or even hope that you would adhere to in that situation, you probably admire that about them. This is what made Ms. Marvel worth watching. Sure, its narrative sucked, it wasted a great villain, and there was no hint of character development to be found. But the characters themselves were incredibly likable from the start. They were lighthearted, good-natured, and kind kids just trying to keep up with their responsibilities and have a little fun. Kamala and pretty much everyone that we are supposed to be cheering for treats people with respect, even when that respect is not reciprocated. That is something admirable that we can look up to, and it gets us to support her. Even though I hated the last half of the story, I kept watching because I enjoyed the characters. The second aspect of likability is relatability. This is just what it sounds like. If an audience feels like it can relate to a character in some way, shape, or form, then they will feel more connected to them. And if you feel like you have a connection to a character, you are more likely to like that character, or at least the part of them that you connect to. This connection can be formed from anything. Going back to our discussion of Friends, a lot of people originally attached themselves to the character because it was a bunch of different stereotypes of white people in the 90s. You had the nerdy guy who everyone ignored in high school, the rich prima donna who doesn't understand how the world works, the one with the heart of gold, the one who uses sarcasm as a shield, the ditz, and the overly sexual one. While these characters do develop over time, originally they are just blank slates with the barest structure that people could project themselves onto. If you don't feel like you fall into a character stereotype, that doesn't mean you cannot relate to some other facet of them. You may feel connected to a character because they have the same skin tone, or because they share a similar life experience as you, or just because you both have a younger sister. It can be fairly obvious or more nuanced. Listen to this clip from an Actors Roundtable about how Tom Hiddleston related to his character Loki.
So when I first started playing Loki, I was like, okay, he's a son. I know what that is. He's a brother. I know what that is. He's got all this internal kind of pain, but he's masking it with something. I know what that is.
A character I can relate to is Luiso Madrigal from Encanto. I am the oldest of all my siblings and cousins, except for a handful that were 6 to 8 years older than I was. Anytime there was a family gathering, the older kids all secluded themselves in the room or just didn't show up, so I was always the one in charge. I was the one making sure no one jumped into grandma's pool in December and entertaining them while the adults ate dinner in peace. That bred a strong sense of responsibility and dependability in me. And while I am very grateful for those values, as I grew up, it did become very easy to agree to help everyone else at the expense of myself. Or as Louisa puts it, so much of the discussion nowadays is about representation. That is, the importance of characters looking like you on the outside. And don't get me wrong, that is important. But it doesn't mean that you cannot connect to characters that share similar values or personality traits just because they don't look like you. I am not a Colombian woman with super strength, but I am a firstborn that struggles with the fear of failing both the family I was born with and the family I have chosen. Our final aspect of likability is whether or not a character can be entertaining. And before we go more in depth on this, let me be clear. You can still find characters that you have an affection for or in which you relate to entertaining. They certainly can be. But when I talk about the entertaining aspect of likability, I mean characters that you don't particularly relate to and don't necessarily have an affection for, yet still enjoy seeing on screen. These characters can also be broken down into subcategories. The first one being characters that you disagree with, but cannot help but feel charmed by. Great examples of these include characters like the Joker, Dr. Doom, and Lex Luthor. The Joker is a psychopath who enjoys causing as much pain and suffering as possible. Yet we all get excited when we see him on screen or in print, because he normally does it in incredibly entertaining ways. Dr. Doom and Lex Luthor are not agents of chaos like the Joker is, but they have one defining trait that makes them incredibly fun to read or watch: arrogance. These two characters are so arrogant that you cannot help but sit back and laugh at their sheer audacity. There is a story in Marvel Comics where a giant space god is individually passing judgment on all of Earth's citizens as either worthy or unworthy to continue living. The god tells Dr. Doom that he will judge him as worthy if he will simply tell the Celestial that Reed Richards is smarter than he is. And Doom just laughs and walks away, which is the most Dr. Doom thing to do. And the Celestial can do nothing but respect him for it. Literally, he says he passes himself, I agree. And that is the final word on the matter. And Lex Luthor is no different.
I warn you one final time. Only a 12th level intellect has the slightest hope of surviving what you are about to experience.
Then I'm overqualified.
For a character that isn't strictly villainous, we can look at the Punisher. I don't necessarily agree with the Punisher's methods, but there is something undeniably entertaining about this guy. There is a story where the world is quite literally ending and all the street level bad guys go to a bar to have one last hurrah when the Punisher walks in and says the most Punisher thing I think I've ever heard. He says, "They say you cannot take it with you when you go," which begs the question, what am I gonna do with all these bullets? pulls the charging handle on his rifle, and we never get to see the outcome. But honestly, whatever we make up in our heads is going to be better than anything that could have been printed. But getting back on track here, the second subcategory of entertaining characters are the ones that we love to hate. These are normally the characters that get our blood boiling to such an extent that we will watch a project just to see that they get what's coming to them. Dolores Umbridge from Harry Potter certainly comes to mind, as does Draco Malfoy's depiction in the first 5 books. And you can probably fit a fair amount of, quote, reality, unquote, TV stars in here as well. But one of my favorite love-to-hate characters is Ethelwald from The Last Kingdom. This slimy little rat will be little more than an annoyance in the first 2 seasons, only for him to launch a scheme with dire consequences in season 3. I won't spoil it for you, but let me just say that seeing him run through with a sword felt a little too kind of an ending. Love to hate characters are almost universally antagonists. This is because you can root for a protagonist to deliver the much needed comeuppance, or the protagonist's nobility helps put it in stark relief just how bad the antagonistic character is. A big problem arises when your protagonist is just as antagonistic as anyone else in the project. And the problem is that it doesn't make us want to root for them. Rather than having an antagonist we love to hate, we have a protagonist that we just simply hate, as we will see with the example of our unlikable character. Guys, before we get to the next part of the video, I just wanted to take a second and let you guys know that I teamed up with another YouTuber by the name of Malcolm Punch to do a playthrough of Halo Infinite's campaign, and it was a blast. Malcolm is a very, very good friend of mine, and as you all know, I love Halo, so when he asked me to do a legendary run-through of it, I signed on without hesitation. If you enjoy watching Halo or listening to Halo or seeing idiots play Halo, then definitely check him out after our video. But without further ado, we'll get back to the actual video you clicked on, and a link will be in the description for Malcolm's channel and the Halo run-through. Thank you guys. Okay. So we've discussed the importance of likable characters and the various ways an audience may find a character likable. But to really hammer home its importance, I'm going to give you an example of an unlikable character, She-Hulk. And before I do, as I said earlier, likability is purely subjective. What one person finds likable, another may not. So if you genuinely enjoyed She-Hulk's character, good for you. I'm not here to step on you, but I did not. I already went over a lot of my grievances with this show in my review of season 1, but I was discussing that review with a very good friend of mine whose opinion I value highly, and she expressed to me that she felt my reasoning for considering She-Hulk to be so unlikable was very cringeworthy, is probably a nice way to put it. As we discussed it further, I did come to the realization that I was not as accurate with my wording as I could have been. And I can understand how it may have come off as too political or harsh, especially if you didn't see the show and cannot fall back on additional supporting examples to understand why I would hold the opinion that I do. This is a sensitive topic for many people, which is why I hate covering shows that are overtly political in their tones. Unfortunately, you cannot separate the politics from the show when they are as innately entwined as they are in She-Hulk. But if you are going to cover something political, you must be very precise with your language, something I failed to do in my attempt to be more off the cuff within my review of She-Hulk. As such, I want to use this opportunity to clarify my reasoning for why She-Hulk and most of the other characters that we see in season 1 are unlikable. What we need to clarify is the reasoning for disliking her for equating Bruce Banner's trauma to her being catcalled and mansplained. When I discussed it in my review, I said that her conversation with Hulk was similar to a friend sharing their trauma of being beaten by their parents, only to have another friend state that they know how they feel because they were catcalled this morning. This is not a great representation of the scene that I am referencing in the show. To be fair to the writers, it is not like Hulk was telling her about all of the stuff he has gone through and bearing his soul to Jennifer Walters, only to have her tell him that she has had to go through worse every day. Let's take a closer look at the scene in question.
Well, here's the thing, Bruce. I'm great at controlling my anger. I do it all the time. When I'm catcalled in the street, when incompetent men explain my own area of expertise to me, I do it pretty much every day, because if I don't, I will get called emotional or difficult, or might just literally get murdered.
Listen to the music as Jennifer starts talking. It invokes a sense of empathy and vulnerability as she tells us what she has gone through. Even those of us who don't have those problems can at least feel some emotion and sympathy in the moment. If it had stopped there and then moved on to the next scene or discussion, then it would have left us with an emotional connection to her, but it didn't. Here's the full clip.
Well, here's the thing, Bruce. I'm great at controlling my anger. I do it all the time. When I'm catcalled in the street, when incompetent men explain my own area of expertise to me, I do it pretty much every day, because if I don't, I will get called emotional or difficult, or might just literally get murdered. So I'm an expert at controlling my anger because I do it infinitely more than you. So all of this just feels like projecting a lot of shit onto me.
See.
It is this second part where those empathetic feelings completely dissipate, because it seems like Jennifer is dismissing the challenges that Bruce has gone through in his life. Putting someone down like that doesn't make us want to root for her. It makes us want to turn the television off. Bruce is a likable character that we've seen go through quite a lot over the past 14 years. And we don't want to see his struggles trivialized by a rookie. If you are not a huge fan of the MCU and don't understand what I am talking about with regard to Bruce, watch this clip from the Avengers in 2012 and tell me how you feel when Jennifer barks at him.
The cell was just
In case you needed to kill me, but you can't. I know, I tried. I got low. I didn't see an end, so I put a bullet in my mouth, and the other guy spit it out. So I moved on. I focused on helping other people. I was good, until you dragged me back into this freak show and put everyone here at risk. You want to know my secret, Agent Romanoff? You want to know how I stay calm?
Dr. Banner, put down the scepter.
Now, as I said, it is not like Bruce was expressing his heart to Jennifer before she put him down like that. In fact, you could even theorize that Jennifer doesn't know about the suicide attempts and his dad beating him as a child, and everything else that has happened to him. It is not exactly something you want to bring up at Thanksgiving, but the writers of the show do know about it, and they still chose to create this scene in which their lead character demeans another that we have spent a lot of time with and have established an emotional connection to. It just doesn't exactly start us out on her side. Beyond the writing issues, what this does is give ammunition to everyone that wanted to see this project fail. Everyone who hates you now has all the info they need to shout about wokeness and write your story off immediately. And before you say that you don't care about those people, let me explain why it is important not to intentionally antagonize a particular faction of your audience. They yell really loudly. And when they yell, they influence the people in the center. Now, they may not necessarily draw anyone in. I mean, all they are really doing is taking the vinegar you shoved on them and throwing it back out there. So it isn't like it's going to magically turn into honey and bring others to their cause. But it is still vinegar that is going to make it to the center regardless. And most people who are tired of one group calling the other woke snowflakes, only to have that group retaliate by calling the others bigots, will probably tune everything out. And this includes the source of what they are currently shouting about, your television show. By intentionally being inflammatory, you are lifting the group that supports you up, but at the expense of antagonizing a group that hates you and alienating everyone else. The group that supports you will do so no matter what. So why not try and give the people in the center some honey instead of letting the group that hates you give them secondhand vinegar? You can still share the experiences and struggles of a modern woman, but you don't have to do so with such anger. Instead, we got this moment from episode 2.
Well, I did not go to law school and rack up 6 figures in student loans to become a vigilante that is for billionaires and narcissists and adult orphans for some reason.
Hey, remember when Hulk messed up his arm to bring trillions of lives back from oblivion, and then Iron Man sacrificed himself to prevent Thanos from wiping out the entirety of the galaxy? Or when Black Widow sacrificed herself to get the Soul Gem? Or when Thor battled the Dark Elves to save Earth? Or when Captain America asked to be blown up to defeat Hydra? Narcissists. A reluctant hero is not a new thing. It is a common internal struggle for characters to have. Their status quo is upended and they are faced with doing the right thing at the expense of the rest of their life. If this show didn't want to do that, if it wanted to give Jennifer Walters the ability to walk her own path, it could have shown her striking a balance and determining that she could have had a greater effect on the world as a lawyer rather than a Hulk. It did not have to be at the expense of our greatest heroes, who, whether billionaires, narcissists, or orphans, still saved the Earth. I think that the writers were trying to use this as meta-humor, a tease at the similar story beats of our heroes. But the humor just didn't land to me, a critique I made in my full review. And I think the reason for that is because the character who was making the joke just wasn't likable. If she was, we probably could have given her a slide. But instead, it just left a sour taste in my mouth. Contrast that with one of the best characters, male or female, ever written. Ripley from the Alien franchise. She isn't perfect, far from it, but she is well liked and respected by her crew in the first movie. A crew of almost all blue-collar men, by the way. They care for her, and she cares for them. She has real human emotion, and she isn't afraid to show that emotion. In the second film, she is discounted and written off by both the male and female Marines initially. But she earns a modicum of respect amongst them through her work ethic, not by demeaning them, but by simply showing what she can do. By the halfway point of the movie, she is their de facto leader. She doesn't have to prove anything to them. She just takes bold action that is in keeping with her steadfast character. She doesn't claim to be perfect at anything and humbly accepts instruction from her male counterpart on how to use a rifle when offered. And she does all of this while still caring for a young girl whom she has just met. She is the heroine that all people, men or women, should look up to. She is the woman I want my daughter to look up to, not She-Hulk. The stories with likable characters tend to do better than the ones with unlikable ones, or even with bland characters. And while what an audience finds likable may be subjective, there's typically something in a well-written character that we will latch onto. Whether that is finding something about their personality pleasant, their qualities admirable, their struggles relatable, or their actions entertaining. And while not every character can be as iconic as Ripley, simply giving an audience something to like is better than giving them something to hate. That is going to do it for us. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy day to watch our video, and I really do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave us a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and tell us in the comment section what some of your favorite characters are. Likes, subscriptions, and comments really do help promote the video in the algorithm, so thank you all for blessing us in that way. I've been your host, Jacob, and I will see you all in the next one.
Every core computers now have primary control of critical vehicle functions.